is, and maybe it's happening and it's behind the scenes and we don't hear about it enough. And maybe I'm not doing my part in researching it enough, but I don't feel like when this situation has come up that I should have to do all that when it's constantly being pushed at me. I should know what's occurring and I should know what change is taking place. But even with this platform, Eric, I don't hear any solutions. I don't see anything that's being put out there of how to affect change. I don't see anything being put out for you or for me or for anybody that's around us of what we can do to create change and what we can do to help this situation. That's what frustrates me. All I continue to hear is I just hear words and I just hear phrases. I don't hear any solution-based information coming out. And that to me is what frustrates me of you've got this platform. You've got the attention now. You even had this Nike spot. I don't hear anything coming out of it that's going to change the next situation that comes up that we as a society have to deal with when there's another shooting or another incident that happens involving police and someone of color. And regardless of if the police, if it's someone that's black or white or whatever at this point, male or female, that's the problem I have is I see that Kaepernick has a platform and so do really a lot of these NFL guys and even NBA guys. I just hear them continue to talk about social injustice. They continue to throw the word around. Let's figure out then some solutions of how to fix it. That's the one thing I don't hear, Eric, and that's what frustrates me is these guys have the platform. They've got the media's attention. They could come up with things that could be put into play. Body cameras on officers came from being pushed to do something to enact change. And really since then, nothing else has been done. More of those type of things need to come out or all this is going to be for nothing. And we're going to be in the same spot that we were because the platform's not being used to enact change, Eric. That's what frustrates me. All right, Eric, as we end the NFL portion of Talkworthy, let's take it back on the field for our last topic here. We talked about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, and we didn't really have a lot of good things to say. And boy, did they pull off a shocker on Sunday as they went into New Orleans and Ryan Fitzpatrick put it on the Saints. What a performance he had. Probably the most shocking result of the week was the fact to look at that game and not only see that the Buccaneers were hanging in there, but they were just annihilating the Saints defense, a defense that we thought was improved. We both thought the Saints were going to have a very good year. And again, they started out 0-2 last year, but it never looks very good to go get embarrassed by the worst team in your division at a home opener for an NFL season. But it has to bring up the question, Eric, and we talked about it last week. Jameis Winston currently suspended 3 games. The talk coming through training camp was Jameis Winston is not a lock to step back in week 4 and be the starting quarterback for this team. So did Ryan Fitzpatrick put himself in a position, Eric, where he should remain the starting quarterback until he loses it or gets hurt?
Well, the thing about Ryan Fitzpatrick is that he's just as capable of next week going out and throwing 4 or 5 interceptions because he's done it. When he was a New York Jet, I've seen it happen. So until we see another 2 or 3 weeks, I can't really be certain that this phenomenal game, with New Orleans means really anything. However, where I think it actually might get interesting is if he does play well over the next couple of games, they might then make a motion to say, all right, we'll ride Fitzpatrick for the rest of this year, potentially then start offering Winston as trade bait before the trade deadline to see what kind of assets you can get for Winston before the middle of the year. I really don't think, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that Ryan Fitzpatrick is anybody in the NFL's answer for a long-term deal, a long-term quarterback. But if he's going to fill a gap until you can either get to the draft while you're gaining other assets in a trade for Jameis Winston and going through the draft and free agency, then I think you might have a story here with a quarterback controversy in Tampa Bay. But I'll keep it real short and sweet by saying until Fitzpatrick has 2 or 3 games like that, I'm not really all that nervous if I'm Jameis Winston.
You don't believe in Fitzmagic?
I mean, if he's going to play like he did in week 1, then I'm really nervous if I'm Jameis Winston, because Winston, we talked about, he has his own struggles and he's really never produced. the level that he really needs to, as coming out of Florida State with the potential that he had and with all the off-field stuff. But again, I'm not sold and I'm not buying in on Fitzpatrick doing this week in and week out. Just like you said about Connor in Pittsburgh, the same thing with Fitzmagic. It's not going to be like this week in and week out.
No, the Superdome, or whatever they call it now, whatever sponsor they have, has always been conducive to putting up a lot of points. So I think you and I would agree, though, if somehow he finds a way to go 3-0, that they're not going to take him out of there. But let's say that he goes 2-1 and they come in and Jameis Winston is reinstated. If he continues to play at a high level, at that point, what do you think that Tampa might be thinking?
Yeah, I mean, look, and Winston's not coming off of an injury or something. He's coming off of a suspension. So it's not like he's held in high regard, right? So, yeah, I get where your line of thinking is on this. If Fitzpatrick is getting you by and players are buying into his talent and what he can do downfield, certainly Mike Evans was appreciating it a couple of times. I know Deshaun Jackson went out of that game with an injury, but if he's going to get the ball downfield and really move this offense, I think you do have to leave him in because Winston doesn't really just automatically earn his way back as a starter coming off of a suspension for a violation, especially if the guy filling in for you is playing well. So I get where you're going with that.
Well, all I got to say is I think that if you're Jameis Winston, you better be hoping that the Bucs go 0-2. I mean, you probably won't want to publicly say that, but if Fitzpatrick plays really good, especially, again, if they find a way to go 3-0 for this team where they were expected to be, I don't think Winston's gaining that spot back. If he comes out and falls on his face and is the Ryan Fitzpatrick we think he is, to steal a little of Denny Green's thinking, then I think Winston comes back in week 4 and is the starter because, again, he did play extremely well in the preseason. All right, Eric, as we close out segment 2 here on Talkworthy, let's take it from the field to the racetrack. The NASCAR playoffs are about to kick off this week, but the big news before the race at Indy was the fact that Martin Truex Jr. and the 78 Furniture Row team, that Furniture Row team will be closing its doors after this season. The defending NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series champion from last year will no longer have a team fielded in the sport next year. We talked about this rumor was getting floated out there, that there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of rumor. 5 Hour Energy was leaving, and Barney Visser had basically said, look, I'm not going to fund this team out of my pocket. I'm not going to go broke. I'm not going to continue to liquidate and sell off inventory to keep this team alive. I've accomplished everything I've wanted to do and dreamed of doing. Not only now as NASCAR starting to lose sponsors, Eric, now they're losing championship winning teams that can just not afford to be part of this sport. What were your thoughts on that, Eric, when you saw that news come out? How shocked really were you when the news broke?
Due to the fact that you and I have been talking about the struggles financially for the sport of NASCAR for well over 2 years now, the fact that it's getting to this level doesn't really surprise me. What does surprise me is that you have a championship team where a sponsor like 5 Hour Energy is not getting enough return on their investment, even with a driver as popular as Martin Truex Jr. is, because he was a very popular champion last year. Obviously, we talked about the role that he's had with his longtime girlfriend and what they've been through personally. And it was just a great story to see him win a NASCAR championship. And if there is no return on that investment for a major sponsor like 5 Hour Energy, that tells me all I need to know right now about the sport of NASCAR. And then you have an owner, Barney Visser, out of Furniture Row. Denver Mattress Company has sponsored that team, and that's the company that he owns, Furniture Row, as well as Denver Mattress. They're involved in sponsoring this team, but he's now saying, look, my pockets are deep, but they're just not deep enough to continue to fund this team. I mean, he self-funded that team for a good many years, even when Kurt Busch was making his comeback, and they've really, really done a fine job as an organization, especially running out of Denver, Colorado, when everybody else is basically running out of North Carolina. They have just done about as well as you could have ever hoped, especially culminating in a championship, and they can't survive. You got Lowe's leaving the sport with the 7-time champion Jimmy Johnson. Justin, it's just the long and the short of it is there's a major, major problem. And, our listeners know what we feel about it. We're very, very concerned. I was just tweeting with Jim Noble earlier today. He's been on our show a couple of weeks ago, And, Jim has left Sirius NASCAR radio to go on to do some things with another organization. And I just find that there may be writing on the wall if we really look hard enough. Kasey Kahne is, now I know he's having health concerns right now, but that's the here and now. Kasey Kahne is leaving NASCAR as a full-time driver. He is the same age as me, 38 years old, and he's done. He's hanging it up. He's going to go on. He's going to run his sprint car team. He's going to do things that he enjoys. But when you see guys like Carl Edwards and Kasey Kahne and others hanging it up to go do other things, you just have to wonder, are all of these guys starting to see what's in the future, 5 years down the road, maybe when that TV deal is up? Because Justin, as you have talked about, I think there's a major storm on the horizon.
Yeah, this is just more ammunition for what we've been talking about, that NASCAR is going to have to do something, and they're going to have to shake something up. And again, part of the problem is it now takes upwards of $30 million to have a competitive team in the sport. That's just crazy money. It's crazy money when you can think about the fact that attendance is down, so it's less people at the racetrack. It's less people at your sponsor activation, whatever promotion that you're doing at or around the track. It's less eyeballs watching on TV for your advertisements that you may run. It's less eyeballs on your race car with your logo on it. And again, it's not just the money that it costs to sponsor these teams. If you're going to really push that promotion, you've got to spend even more money and put out commercials and be at the racetrack with tents and some of the different fan interactive things that are on site when you go to the track. It's not just that money. It's a lot more that has to be invested. And companies, I think, just don't see the value in that anymore. So NASCAR has to find a way to reduce the cost of this sport, or there won't be a sport around. Because at this rate, with the way that they are losing sponsors, they can't even, I mean, Eric, it wasn't that long ago that there were good teams going home. I can remember when Michael Waltrip Racing came into this sport, his cars were missing the show because there was upwards of 48, 50, 52 cars plus showing up for races. I can remember listening to SiriusXM and hearing the guys talk about some of the first Brickyard 400s. There was 80 some cars that showed up to qualify. Now they can barely get 40 out there. It's almost like NASCAR is going to have to do something where they take the TV deal and they just go ahead and split it up. We're going to cut the sport down to 30 teams, and we're going to give them all $15 million to just run their team. And something with the sponsorships maybe would come. NASCAR would have their own set of 15 or 20 sponsors that they would rotate through the drivers, and they could paint their cars up however they wanted. And then there's not going to be all that money given to the track that they have to give out in purses. There's going to have to be something that changes, because I don't know if the sponsorship model is going to be able to support the fields that they are. And we already see it now where from week in, week out, you don't know how the cars are going to be painted. You don't know what sponsor is just going to jump up for one race because they're promoting something in that area, or it's a local market. They want to take people out. It's just a different model, and NASCAR has to adjust to this because, Eric, again, if this TV deal doesn't mimic what they had, I don't see how they're going to be able to support this sport. It just doesn't feel like that's going to happen. And again, we've talked about the France family, that they've explored selling the sport. You've got drivers that are walking away. I think a lot of these guys, these veteran guys, are going to start to walk away because their owners are going to, at some point when their contracts are coming to an end to run out, they're going to say, look, we can't pay you the salary that we were. We're going to have to work something out where we're doing more of a purse split, but we can't give you 10, 12, $14 million a year anymore because we're struggling to even get that to fund the car and get it on the racetrack. And we can go out and get a young driver for a tenth of that cost who's more than happy just to get in that race car because it's a lot more money than they're making running dirt races or local asphalt races. I think that's going to be the thing we see, Eric, where I don't know if you're going to see a lot of drivers that are going to be able to stick around as long unless they're willing to work with their teams and basically take a pay cut, because I just don't see that model working. We already saw that sort of led to the Harvick Dale Jr. spat that they had last year, where Jr. came out and said that of like, hey, it's changing. These young guys, they take a whole lot less money. That's more money that the owners can put into the team that can make cars that they're fielding stronger. Eric, it's not a good look for NASCAR. It's never good to lose a team. It's a really bad look when you have the current reigning champion that doesn't even